of you, depending on the time you're watching this. I will act like we are connected on YouTube, but I know YouTube is always late. So I'm refreshing here while I'm talking, but I will assume that we are connected while I refresh. And I was saying good morning, good afternoon, good night, because it depends on your time zone, of course. I'm time traveling, believe it or not, with our guests, Sarah and Shawna. Hello. Because in the neck of the woods is 9 hours after we are. So thank you so much for waking up so early for this.
Yeah, good morning.
And so we're traveling at the same time. This is not a comic show. This is time travel.
Ooh, I like that.
Just horror, not a horror one, but maybe some Twilight Zone. As every time I'm involved. Anyway, so and in case you're watching this live, and as you know, if you're not watching it live, we have the zombie mode. Zombie mode doesn't mean you're dead. It means you're not watching it live. And after that, for the joke, my public service announcement of the day, if you allow me, Sarah and Shawna, you know I have to do it. You know, just can't avoid it. Wear your fucking mask.
Yay, do it, please, God. Yes.
Again, wear your fucking mask. As I always say, the mask is not meant to protect you. It's meant to protect others from you. That's why we can protect you too. Yes, but that's not the point. The point is protect your elders, your friends, your family, your loved ones, the children, the kids. And if somebody tells you, no, the kids cannot get COVID-19, lies. They can, and they can die. And there's a second part. When people doesn't die because of COVID, there's something that is called chronic illnesses. There's people that's been suffering for months the consequences of COVID. Lung, encephalitis, arms, legs, it's still 6 months later. So it's really, please don't be assholes. And last but not least, as I always say, if you think you're important, your freedom is so important, you're above, caring for anybody else, blah, 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 blah. Leave this fucking channel now. I don't want you here. And that's not good.
Yeah. Can you come please be in charge of America?
Yeah. Just for the next 31 days or whatever.
Yeah. Please. Biden and Kamala are in power, After that, I don't want it. But now, okay. Yeah. I couldn't pardon, non-criminals or traitors or spies. I couldn't.
Yeah.
Hey, my track record could be better just because of that, right? But anyway, how are you? That's the most important thing. Sarah, how are you? Shawna, how are you? How's things in the neck of the woods? In the whole area, what are you going to call it? It's better? It's worse? It's the same? How's the situation?
Shawna, you want to go first?
Okay. Well,
Shawna just you did to me.
I think
it's not great.
Yeah. I think at this point we're all lucky to and grateful to have jobs and to still be working and to do this art form that we love so much. And it just feels like it's like a few months at a time right now, the market is not doing great. The US economy is, so we're cautiously optimistic about what's to come. And honestly, I spend most of my days just trying to enjoy the work itself. Because it's so hard to feel great about anything in the US right now, like right this second. So and I'm sure Sarah does this to some extent. But I try to really focus on the work and the relationships I have with my creators. And every book is a big new world that you're introducing to the marketplace and to readers. So you try to sort of crawl into that world and make it the best version of that world you can. So I spend most of my days just really trying to crawl into the work and focus on it and do the best job I can.
Yeah, it's been very hard to balance the business needs, which I hate to sound corporate and say it, but the deadlines we set for folks, the 2 printer deadlines, with the fact that in America, it's not great right now. And, people have been not missing deadlines or making deadlines for a variety of reasons, from literally having COVID to having to take on more work because a partner maybe lost their job, to having to be with their kids because they're home all day and the schooling is just basically a Zoom call. Yeah, like Shawna. And it's very hard because you want to say like, please, I really need you to meet your deadlines. But against something like that, the fact that anybody's getting up in the morning and functioning at all is kind of a miracle.
Yeah.
So right now, I would say it's everybody just kind of holding on to their butts and trying to do what they can during the day. And I'm hoping that we've turned, this tiny corner, just waiting on the inauguration and hopefully some of the vaccines starting to trickle out, but that's not going to fix a lot of the very deep-seated problems with this country.
Yeah.
So
we're not going to have school. Yeah, we're not going to have school till the fall easily. Like there's just no way.
No, it's the same thing here. When people think about the vaccination and all that, it's like, wait, here, of course, the European Health Agency and the Spanish Health Agency, in general, they're always the last ones because they are, let me say it that way, I'm sorry, they are the most careful.
Yeah.
So until they are completely sure, there's no way they are going to approve the vaccines. And they approved them yesterday, literally. So they start to be delivered on Sunday, so the 27th. And it's going to be for healthcare workers, residents, elders and all that. And then bit by bit. So the government said June, maybe 40%. We'll start to think in June about herd immunity. September, we could be in a good place. Full immunity, they were saying end of the year, next year.
Yeah, I'm hoping that this time next year things are better.
Yeah, they will be. Check.
Yeah. I miss conventions.
Yeah, I know it's weird to say that, but it's true.
And what part did you miss of the convention? The work crazy? I don't think you missed that. Or you missed the meeting with colleagues?
It's the connection. It's there are things that you can get done in a face-to-face conversation that's 5 minutes long that could take 78 emails. But also just being exposed to new stuff. But I also kind of miss just selling books, like talking to the little kids on the floor about what they like or asking someone what they've read lately that they dig and then having something to recommend for them. Like, I miss that. I do not miss doing it for 4 days in a row on no sleep, but
no, I have the same thing. I actually really like working the booth, which is a funny thing to say after 22 years in this business, but it is one of the best. Like, it puts you in touch with the people who are reading your books. And when you're talking to a 16-year-old who's holding 4 copies of 4 different books and they're super excited and can't decide which one to read first, that's literally why we do this job. That and the creators. So at a convention, excusing the exhaustion and the travel and all that stuff, you get to talk to the people who are reading your books and you get to talk to the people who are making your books. And those are really sweet relationships for people who are basically have dedicated their lives to this. So yeah, I miss it too. And it's funny how much I actually like the whole, taking credit card transactions in the booth in the middle of Comic-Con. There's something that's so satisfying about that when you see people, like you see their eyes light up with joy to get a new book or something they've been waiting for. So that's the connection. I think Sarah's totally right. It's that connection of just with everybody who cares about this business.
And is that the thing you miss the most? I mean, Victor Frankenstein here. Nice to meet you. This is my vaccine. It's a road trip. Right? Just pop into you. Pandemic's over. We're all cured. You can go out.
Yeah.
And I tell you, first thing you've been dying to do for 6 months. What's it? What you could do?
I know what I would like to do after checking on my friends and family. I want to go to like a really dark, crappy bar that's kind of crowded and sit and have a beer at a bar with people in it.
I'm going to be there with Sarah, basically. Yeah. I would like a nice hot toddy, but yeah, there we go. Yeah, or I would like to go to New York. That's the other thing. Like, I started really having the travel and missing people and missing places back in October when it was around time for New York Comic-Con. And my best friend lives there. So it's been this like annual go to New York in October. And that that one has been hard, you know, just not like thinking of all the people you won't get to see as long as this continues. And
you have Instagram and Facebook doing that, like this time 4 years ago, and it's all New York Comic Con, and it's all the friends.
It's so harsh.
Like, oh.
Yeah.
It's so harsh. Yeah.
It's funny that if you asked me months ago about it, I could say, nah, you know, for me it's 9, 10, 12, or even 18 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Of course I don't miss it. But when the time for San Diego came, I started to miss it a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
Not because of Facebook. I said, fuck you, Facebook. Stop reminding me. But at the same time, I was like, oh my God, yes, I miss it now. I miss it. And I was tired. And I did, I think, 18 San Diego in 22 years.
Yeah, that's where David and I first met.
Yeah.
I mean,
and I'm not sure if I met you at Wildstorm or if I met you at the con, Sarah.
Probably Wildstorm.
Yeah. So, well, because I used to go to Wildstorm the day after the convention, so it was together. So, but you know that thing when you think I am not going to miss it until it happens, and you realize, I miss going to the cons now, even with all the crazy hours on flights and all that. And of course, when New York Comic Con, same thing. It was like, okay, you know what? And now I need to go to conventions. Stop this fucking thing now, and let's all go back. But what you just said about the bar, you know, that feeling of grabbing a beer and not feeling worried.
Yep. Yeah. And just being around strangers, being around people, going to a concert, you know.
Yeah.
That's
smelling.
Yes. I also would love to go to Disneyland, which is a weird thing.
It's not here. We have a promise. We have a promise. You know, it's Disneyland the first day we can.
Yep.
Because
yeah.
PortAventura, which is the Universal Park away from here in Tarragona, or Disneyland Paris.
Yeah.
She keeps saying, I want to go to Disneyland when this is over. And my answer is the first day.
Yep. It's just a very, very symbolic thing of, you know, let's go back to the super crowded.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's go crazy to the most money involving place.
Yeah.
I'm just going to spend money like an idiot. Have fun around 1 million people, and you can rubbing shoulders, etc. Because you don't
care.
Yep. Question for both of you. See, I'm hearing my daughter.
I heard her.
With two doors closed. She's even worse than me, and that's difficult. Anyway, why comics, Sarah? Why did you, of all the chances you had in life, you said, this is my life, this is what I want to be in my life? It was always you always wanted to do because you read comics since you were a kid, or it just felt in your way?
A little bit of all of that. So I read comics when I was little, and then at some point I did not think there were comics for me anymore. And like a lot of kids and a lot of like lady identifying people, I dropped out of the comics world until late in high school, where I read about Love and Rockets and Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. And I was like, oh, there are non-superhero comics. Where have I been? So that's when I really started picking comics back up again. And growing up in San Diego in the 90s, you could basically just walk up to Comic-Con and like find a pass on the ground or ask somebody to give you theirs when they were done. So being able to go to that exposed me to just so much of everything. And that's where I really started learning that comics truly are a medium, not just superheroes or like indie weird stuff too.
Yeah.
So I always knew that I wanted to work in something creative, but behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So, you know, I thought about film or other types of publishing. And when I graduated college, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. You know, I'm going to have to move to LA or New York. And I worked my way through college as a secretary. And I was looking for a job just for a while. And Wildstorm was hiring a receptionist. And I was like, oh, I can do that. And so I interviewed and was like, yeah, I want to work for you guys, but I would also love to learn editorial. And they were like, yeah, sure, kid.
Yeah.
We'll see about that. And I just made that happen. So basically, I am very lucky in that I basically got to go to comic book college in a lot of ways, because Wildstorm was this full service studio that had editorial, print production, colorists, artists, pencilers, inkers, all in-house. So I could just kind of bop around from department to department and be like, ooh, what are you doing? And people were wonderful and generous with their time and basically mentored me. And then, I just waited around until someone was like, I'm kind of busy today, Sarah. You want to do this for me? And I'm like, yes, I do. So I just tried to make myself useful.
Around that time.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, that's kind of my story. I really love helping creative people do their best work. And I love the collaboration part of it.
And also one thing that helped a lot at Wildstorm, let's say, sometimes not so much for people to keep working, was that you guys had the best view in the world.
We did. I basically had a oceanfront view for several years of my life, which, in La Jolla, overlooking where the baby seals are born. Like, it was, I was very lucky. Yeah.
I remember the first time I went there, Shawna, and I literally told them, I was yelling, like, how the fuck did you get to work here? And you, I don't remember if it was Eddie or Hank, one of them told me it is difficult.
Yeah, it is.
People working more than you think.
Yeah, I mean, we worked a lot. We worked very, very hard. And sometimes you had to make yourself look up and be like, look, ocean, nice. But no, incredibly lucky.
Yeah. And how about you, Shawna? How was it?
Well, I read comics from a very young age because my dad liked weird comics, and he gave me, I was reading like Harvey's when I was 3 and 4, and I was just sort of a voracious reader, and I read anything. And my dad just had all these weird comics. He had some underground stuff, and he was into like heavy metal. And there was this very formative time when we lived in Los Angeles, and he would take us to the Compton swap meet, and he would go buy big stacks of porn mags at this one media booth. Like, he would go by Penthouse and all that stuff, and he would just sort of push my brothers and I over to the comics. So we would just get like a brown paper bag and fill it with whatever we wanted. And the one day we were there, we just found all these old creepy and eerie comics and just shoved them in the bag. And so I think I was 6, and we went home and just read all of those. And I was like, what did I just do to my brain? But that was when I started, my dad also liked spooky movies. So we watched a lot of I remember watching The Bride of Frankenstein with him when I was 4 years old for the first time, and hiding behind him watching it. So that just sort of cracked open this whole thing that I already knew I liked scary movies and that kind of stuff and science fiction. Yeah. And then I kept reading comics because I had the benefit of an older brother who was 4 years older. And he was always reading stuff and passing it along to me. So when I was in 7th grade, when all the other girls were reading Sweet Valley High, I was reading Swamp Thing because I was like, this is romance. And then it kept on going. And it was actually very sweet when I first got my job at Dark Horse in 1997, because one of the books that was really important to me when I was in grade school, 7th and 8th grade, was Concrete. And that was one of those really interesting books. It was so much more than a superhero book, but it had that element of science fiction and the fantastic, but it was also really rooted in, there were so many great messages about
philosophy and environmentalism. He was really
all of that. And that was starting to be really important to me as my view of the world was forming. So when I was around 12, that's when all that stuff sort of gelled together. And I was like, wow, there are these interesting books out there that talk about this stuff. And so but I didn't really conceive of comics as an industry. Just because publishing, to me, I was in Northern California, and it was all travel guides. And I just wasn't even aware that there was an industry until I moved to Portland after college. And I was expecting to write for the weekly paper, because I had been not really a journalist, but I wrote reviews and theater reviews and book reviews and features for the weekly paper in my college hometown. So I moved up to Portland looking for that kind of thing. And at one of the first super crappy jobs I had, selling tickets via Ticketmaster at a department store downtown, there was this break room that was always full of the want ads in the newspapers, like when there were still newspapers, and people would just go up there and look through the ads looking for another job. And I literally sat down with my lunch one day and I just put my head on the table because I was so tired and I hated this horrible job so much. And when I picked my head up, the ad that it was on said, "Dark Horse Comics seeks publicist." And I was like, holy shit, I'm going to go apply for that job. And I got it. Because it was basically a job about writing and loving comics.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent the first 5 years of my career doing marketing for Dark Horse. And it was really, at that point, it was almost like, it was certainly a rare thing to be, I don't know about rare, but to be a woman in the industry at that point. They were basically
rare.
Yeah. And they were just really eager, and I have to say, like, the person that hired me at Dark Horse, Michael Martins, and the whole marketing department, at that point, it was actually this really sweet, friendly, like, look what we can do now. Like, I was the first sort of PR-ish person they hired, because they had been around for 10 years at that point, but they hadn't, and they were doing marketing, but it was all very diamond focused. So opening up to PR was sort of the way they were trying to, like, crack out and get into the real world and get newspaper coverage and that kind of stuff. And I didn't know what the hell I was doing as a publicist. I just like to write and talk to nice people. And I really loved comics. So, I think my enthusiasm really got me that job. And then after a few years, it was a complicated ride, but I ended up at editorial. I knew after working at Dark Horse for like 6 months, I was like, I don't want to do this marketing stuff anymore. I want to work in editorial, because I started forming relationships with the creators and talking with them about their books. And I interviewed all the creators for the website. So, so I got to know Frank Miller and Will Eisner and Mike Mignola and Jeff Darrow and Gene Colan and all these guys. Because I would do these in-depth interviews and then transcribe them for the Dark Horse website. So, it only took me a couple of those to realize, like, I want to hang out with these guys more. And, so yeah, that's really how it was for me. And now it's 23 years later. And, I think it's really funny that I ended up at Oni, this convoluted path, because I had talked to Joe and James many, many years ago, a couple different times, about coming to work for them. And I always I was like, oh, I think I like Oni. Like, for various reasons, I wanted out of Dark Horse. And so it was just very funny last year when I walked into the Oni office for the first time, like, here I am, everybody. It was a very sweet moment. It was almost like it was like somehow destined to happen after all these years.
It's funny, but this is the part of the story you don't know, sir. We met from 1999. She was working as a publicist.
Yeah.
But she was the one who opened the door, literally, for my guys to start working in the US.
That's awesome.
Because
I didn't know that.
Let me remember, Phil Amara.
Yeah.
Who was the other editor?
Dave Land? Was it Dave?
Yeah, exactly. Phil Amara started with Ramon on that special. That was your idea.
Right. That's right.
What was the character? Oh my God! What was Peter Davis? Spy Boy.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Spy Boy Gillette special.
And
the excuse it had to happen in a snow because, of course, it was Gillette and you had to shave. That was really good. But anyway, that was Ramon, and then Dave Land hired Jesus and Fernando to do a Star Wars Tales.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And that's when we were open. So that's why I always say, when anybody asks me, how did you start? I was like, you have to thank Shawna. That was my start.
Yay, Shawna.
When I wasn't even trying to be an agent, I just went there, and she knows this, because I was there for conventions, which was my real goal in life. And a couple of guys told me, why don't you bring me a portfolio and see what happens? And I came back with work for all of them. And in a big way, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And Ramon is still one of my favorite artists in comics. Like, I would hire that guy to draw almost anything if I could.
Thank you.
Yeah, he's so good.
And you also work with Ramon.
I have, yeah. I've worked with Ramon a couple of times now.
No, I mean, Sarah also.
Sarah did? Oh,
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
You remember when? You're going to go crazy when I remind you.
No, I don't remember when.
You remember that Gen 13 era where Ale was supposed to be the main artist, Chris Clark was writing, Bob Hart was rotating from home.
That sounds familiar. I mean, that was probably the point where I was still looking over people's shoulders. It was great because, you know, I started out as the receptionist and eventually I became Hank Knauz's executive assistant. So I went from like kind of meeting people and making copies and all that stuff to really being able to see the more businessy side of things. And I was the person who took care of vouchers. So I very quickly became a lot of creative people's favorite person because I would make sure they got paid.
In that era, we talked a lot, if you remember, because of Ramon in Year 13. Jesus was doing, what was the name? 21 Down?
21 Down. I think that sounds familiar. Yeah.
Jesus was doing 21 Down.
Crazy.
And Juan was doing, Juan and Francis were doing The Resistance.
For Ben. For Abernathy. Yep.
At the same time, which was, you know, those streets booth with Jimmy and Justin. So you see how much I remember us talking in that era.
I don't remember so many of the books that I've worked on. It's really sad. I have to go through and be like, oh, did I edit that issue sometimes? But you remember the, you know, the friendships and the networking that you do that really does turn into like decade-long relationships. It's wild.
Yeah. That's why I remember it, because I remember talking to you about that, about those 2000, 2001, something like that. Something like that. But anyway, people, that means we're here. We've known each other for a long time, happily, at least in my case.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know about you, but in my case, at least. Let's one difficult. No, it's not a difficult question. But what makes? I always ask this to any editor. What makes a good pitch, and what definitely doesn't? Something that you see on a pitch, like, okay, this is a good way to present it. And the other way around, when you see it, it's like, nope, nope.
You want to go first, Shawna?
I would say.
You can argue. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. You know, I would say what makes a good pitch is an idea you haven't seen 1,000 times before. An interesting narrative approach, something new with characters. You know, one of the things that Sarah and I and the entire Oni editorial department talk a lot about is what haven't we seen in comics, and who hasn't had access to making comics before. And that is a surprisingly robust world. Like, there are just so many stories that have never been told and so many creators whose work has never been seen. And it's sort of a shame when you look back at the history of comics and see how, you know, what a narrow margin it was of who was telling these stories and the kind of stories that were being told for so long. So that's one of the things I think everyone at Oni is looking for right now is something new, something different, a fresh voice, and I'm really tired of remixes. Sometimes it's great, especially for like a kid's book or something, to say it's like Terminator meets the Smurfs meets Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's like, okay, that might be interesting. That might actually be interesting.
Yeah, that sounds great.
I want to do that, like, hey, that doesn't sound that bad. Anyway.
Yeah, it actually doesn't. I could be good at this stuff. Make
a note now. Don't forget it.
Yeah, write it down. I'm going to be putting that in acquisitions in Feb. You know, for a long time, I remember going to conventions and it would be the exact, you know, the same people standing in line, and it was like, this one is like, you know, the Japanese movie The Ring, but it's a gun. And it's like, okay. You know, I'm sorry to say that was an actual pitch I got one time. And I don't care if the person hears me make fun of it. Anyway, so that's mostly the thing for me. Something fresh, something that has teeth that will pull you into the story.
Sorry?
I think for me, it really helps if you kind of do a little research and know who you're pitching. If someone approaches me at Oni with like a superhero book and they come to me and they say, Sarah, I know this really isn't for Oni. would you give me some advice? I am down for that. But if someone is pitching me like a very traditional superhero book and expecting Oni to be their home for it, that's when it takes a little bit of time to do some education about like, you're barking up the wrong tree, basically. So doing research in that respect, but also doing research, like Shawna said, our head of sales and marketing, Margot Wood, has been really educational for me about looking at comics from the marketing and PR side. And now every time I look at a pitch or I look at a project, I say in my head, what is this project going to give that department to talk about that's actually going to get people's attention? And that sounds a little bit cut and dry and a little bit like, oh, capitalism terrifying. But I really want to be a business partner and advocate for the people that we work with. And if they are looking to put their book out through, you know, a traditional book market like Oni, as opposed to self-publishing or like even more indie than us, I want to make sure that they're getting the best deal possible for themselves with the biggest chance for success. And I don't want someone to commit to the multiple years that it takes to make a comic with a different idea of what the metrics of success are that they might not reach, which at the end of the day, if they're okay with that and we love the book and we all agree that that's okay, that's okay. But I just really feel like it's important that we are, like I said, the business partners who are really thinking about the entire life of a book, both from like, wow, this is a great pitch, wow, this is great execution, to how are we actually going to get this in the hands of people? Because at the end of the day, that's the most important thing in a lot of ways. You want to have that connection. Otherwise, you would just doodle in a notebook or write for yourself for a journal. So.
And then we go, you mentioned a couple of times already, in the real world. And this is something that I berate people a lot, including here, when they tell me about, oh, the diamond charts. And I would say, that's not the real world. Stop.
Yeah.
Diamond charts say, oh, Batman sold 80,000. And then they say, Reigner, Tegelmayer, and Dogman sold 1 million. What is the real world? What is the audience we want to reach? Do you agree on that? That's the audience for Oni? What you guys want is the real world audience and not just, of course, the diamond audience. But I'm not, but you guys are going to say, but the rich or Satan. No, of course not. But by the end of the day, you want the real world, right?
For sure.
I think the diamond snapshot of that is very important for some types of comics.
Yeah.
But really embracing the fact that there are all these different types of comics. And, if you had someone from DC on here right now, I think the thing that we could all agree on is that we as an industry need way more people reading comics to be a healthy and sustainable industry. And we, all of us really need to be focused on that, regardless of what kind of comics you make.
Absolutely. Sarah, Shawna?
Oh, yeah.
No?
Sorry. I agree that we want all of those readers. I think a lot about kids these days, just because I have a 7-year-old and I go, back when the world existed, like I would go to the library with him a lot. And I think so much about like how I have to sort of contain myself when I'm looking at graphic novels with Elliot somewhere and another parent is there with their child. And I remember this guy was saying to his little girl one day, like, okay, you've got like 4 graphic novels. I want you to read a real book. And oh God, just hold me back from talking to somebody like that, because what I really wanted to say is, and I said, comics are actually really excellent reading tools for children because they actually light up all the different parts of your brain. You're not just reading words, you're like combining. So I try not to lecture people like that at the library when they're just trying to pick out a book for their 7-year-old. But that's something that I think is really important to sort of shift the perspective. And we've been talking about this in comics for as long as I've been in it, just, trying to get past, when I was doing PR, I was trying to get past the headlines of like bow, bam, comics aren't just for kids anymore, you know. But it's still, that still is part of the perception. And I think a lot of things have helped, like Free Comic Book Day is this beautiful thing that I think the industry helped create, or, you know, did create. And I feel really lucky. I was on the original committee that helped do that between all the different companies. When, God, I remember Joe Quesada was involved with that. And I think it was Joe Fields was one of the retailers that was involved. But we were really trying to figure out, I mean, we used to have these multi-company marketing brainstorms. We were trying to figure out, can we take out ads on TV?
Yes.
And it was sort of like, how can we market comics to the whole world? And somebody came up with the idea of Free Comic Book Day. And that was and that's something that I have seen resonate throughout culture. And I remember seeing, like, the first time the weekly paper in Portland covered, like, there was this big, like, hey, it's Free Comic Book Day. You can go to all these comic book shops and get a free comic book. And then driving by those stores later, there are lines of people outside. And so I think the industry has done some really interesting things that sort of broke us out of those barriers. But we need to keep finding more ways to do that. Yeah, I mean, I think comics are for everyone. Like I said, when I grew up, I was a reader. I would read a cereal box. I would read the newspaper. I would read anything that was in front of me that you could read. And I want people to see comics in that light as it's just another format. It's just another medium. And, you know, I'm happy to say a lot of people I know in the real world, I have neighbors across the street that I cat sit for, and they're always checking out comics from the library. And I was over there cat sitting for them one time, and I found a copy of the Bernie Wrightson Frankenstein 25th anniversary book that I edited. And I was like, holy moly, Alexandra, my neighbor, do you know that I edited this? She had no idea. But it was just such a sweet thing. So, you know, the interest is there. I think it's just getting the information to people somehow, getting them into comic shops, getting them to pick up books at the library, you know, anything you can do. And I think, you know, presentation has a lot to do with that. I think comics are just getting better looking and more beautiful. The art continues to just evolve into just more beautiful and compelling images. So you know, everybody's really working their asses off to try to make this happen. You know, and I think the comics industry will always exist. People will always work in this art form. It's just how robust can the industry be to support people doing it?
Well, I think it'll be more robust. Honestly, I think it won't stop growing.
I hope so.
The moment moment the barriers are you know, literally tore down, the barriers between us and the real world. You know, when the floodgates get open, you can't stop it. And there's nothing more alive in culture. Let me be honest. There's nothing more alive in culture than comics. And I go back to, there's a lot of things that you can do in comics that you can do. And I go back again to Einstein and saying comics is the only art form that can defy Einstein's theory of relativity. You can move in time and space in ways no other art can. You can, something that oh, look, Ramon is here. Ramon Bax.
I know. Hi,
Ramon. So, and something really important that I know I want you to know. I want to know if you agree, and I know you're going to agree. But comics give us a superpower as readers, which is, and I think that's one of the main reasons why comics should be preached from a very young age, because it helps us become a lot more complete as readers and, you know, and as human beings. Meaning, when you read a comic, the first thing, of course, is the alliteration, is the jump between the panels. You have to understand how it works, and if Superman does this, that the next panel is Superman fly. Every other step in between, our brain is going to complete it. And that's how comic readers work. Comic readers' brains work, and that takes me to the second part, which that's when I want. Sorry, I'm speaking too much. When I want you guys to know your opinion about this, is that a comics reader, and I'm talking to you about like comic reader here. When you read a newspaper, when you see the news, when you read another book, you watch a movie, we all, by default, don't look at the surface. We look at what's behind. we look for the second reading, because that's what comics have teach us from a very young age.
Yeah.
To look in depth, to look at what's not there, to look at, okay, if this is the first layer of this movie, what's behind it? Or I'm reading this, I'm watching the news and like, what's really behind those news? Or a newspaper is like, wait, this is the article, but what is it really talking about? So that's why I think comics are so essential as teaching for kids, because if you learn to do that at a very young age, you're a lot more perceptive when you grow up. Sorry, long speech. What do you think?
I totally agree. My biggest thing is that I still think there's a danger of kids of all or no genders aging out like I did. I think there's this huge market for comics for kids, for middle grade readers, for young adult readers, and then a massive gap, and it just falls off a cliff when it comes to adult, especially original graphic novels. So it's very important to me that we find ways to take the Raina readers, the Dogman readers, and find ways to keep them in the family their entire life.
Yeah.
Because if we don't capitalize and take those Raina readers and Dogman readers and turn them into adult readers, it's not good. Not only is it a massive missed opportunity, I literally think it's the future. And if we don't figure that out, we're going to have a major problem. So, I think it's about making comics that actually appeal to real world people. So that means it has to be from tons of different backgrounds, tons of different subject matters, getting to people in tons of different ways. But it's very hard because we're competing with so much other media that is produced, quite frankly, quicker and sold cheaper. Comics are such a work-intensive media, and I don't know if people quite appreciate how much the artists put into it, and just the sheer amount of time it takes.
Yeah.
So that is kind of a big challenge for us, I think, too. You can't have someone take a couple of years of their life to draw a comic and then sell it for 99 cents. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that we all really need to come to grips with, both in competition with all the other media out there, and making sure that we grow an adult comic audience, because we have these great books and these great creators, and I just know people would love them.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they're just not there yet, and it's a problem.
So you're worried. Hey, hello, Greg Lockhart.
Hi, Greg.
Yes, it's live. It's live.
Hey.
Miss you. Want to see you soon. So what we're saying, so you think there's a gap. The problem is we have the kids comics, we have the adult comics, but we're missing something in between, or you mean after the young adult we're missing something there?
I think it's after young adult. There's this window, I think, where I hope that kids, as they grow up, don't think of, oh, it's baby stuff. Oh, I read comics when I was a kid. Because I think that's the fastest way to lose like a 12 or 13-year-old. You do not want to be connected to baby stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't really know what that looks like right now, because also I think, I'm not a parent, but I know people who are, and kids that age, a lot of times they want to be with their friends. They want to be, that sort of thing. Their life changes from sometimes being very, with their family and reading a lot of books to kind of maybe becoming more social and getting out in the world and trying new things. So how do we stay always relevant and kind of maturing with them as they mature into those adult readers? How do we get someone from Raina to Wicked and Divine, I guess is basically what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That I think is a really, really, really big deal.
So a friend of mine would say, we need another Sandman.
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, Sandman.
Not Sandman as a.
Yeah.
No, I'm just trying to think of
getting teenage girls or teenage guys
to
stay. This is the jump. This is not this, but this is not even. All respect to Neil. I know of you, Neil. Nothing bad to say against you. but this is not also really high concept, intellectual stuff. It is, because it uses reference of Shakespeare and all that, but it's, easy to read for the big audience, if you know what I mean. So this is something that covers the gap, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
In some ways, like at 13 or 14, I didn't know about Sandman at that time, but I would have eaten it up. Yeah. I am really focused on those weird kind of preteens where at the end of the day, when you're like 12 or 13, you might not be making your own purchases yet. Yeah. So how do I get that parent to buy Sandman for their 12-year-old? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a weird thing.
It's hard. It's so hard.
But one of the things that at that age kids read up, they want to read about people older than them, but you also don't want 12-year-olds reading about, overtly violent or sexual situations, or like any of those things that you sort of want to shield a little 12-year-old mind from for a couple more years while you can. But the bigger concepts, I think, that's one of the reasons like horror was my genre when I was a kid, because there are all these there were like kids spooky stories. And then, I started reading Stephen King when I was 8, but maybe not all people should do that. But I think there.
If I told you what my older brothers gave me to read when I was 4, including the Savage Wrath of Conan.
Yeah, see, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I think genres, like kids, like sort of hooking into a genre, can sort of help feed them that little, candy trail of like, this is how you get to the next thing. And Sandman was a book that was one of those books that my brother read that when I was 12 made me feel cool for reading comics instead of silly for reading comics, but then I also remember I remember I got my first copy of like Peep Show when I was 11, and I was like, what is this? So there, that stuff was way over my head in terms of my emotional development. But it spiked my interest. It really made me want to know what other kinds of comics were out there. And I knew that someday, I mean, it's funny how long it took me to actually read that stuff with the right perspective and say like, oh God, these people are just messed up adults. I get it. But yeah, I think those things are there, but I think the breadcrumb trail to get from one book to another, it's amazing how much time we spend talking about this stuff. Yeah. Like we spend so much time not in the actual making of the comics pages, but in how do we get this information out there? How do we write this copy in this catalog or for the back of the book to actually make it resonate with someone enough where they'll walk away with this book when they're done.
There's another part of the equation, I guess, that for us, Europeans, we have a much better covered. Because, of course, for us, we didn't have the comics code. We didn't have that censorship. So comics grew a different way. Let's say that way. Because if EC hadn't been killed, EC Comics, and the comic had the evolutions they should have, you could be in the same position we are. Let's not be cocky as Europeans, blah, blah, blah.
No, it's really different. It's truly different. So, and not even European. I think, I'm not that educated about manga for, preteens, but they seem to have found a way to keep with different kinds of people in different kind of ways their entire life. But I think it's like a chicken and an egg. They have such a robust industry because so many people read comics, but so many people read comics or manga because there's so many different kinds. So regardless of what you're into, there's something there for you.
Yeah, but what I meant about European comics is that we have something that you guys miss less and less, but that's very important for us. We have a lot of comics from different parts of the world.
Yeah.
Means if you need something to cover the gap, you're always going to find it. Either your thing is Ed Brubaker's on Phillips Noir, bam, it's there. Yep. Your thing is Vertigo, bam, you have it there. Your thing is manga, it's there. Your thing is French comics from different ages, you have it. American comics, you have it. So we always have access when you go to a comic shop here. Argentinian, Italian, German, French, Spanish, American manga, Korean manhwa, and all that. We always have access to that, which is something that many times I tell to American people, and they're like, well, but we have American comics. Like, no, the thing that makes us robust and the thing that makes the artist so complete and the career so complete is that we have influences and we have all the different comics from all the parts of the world, and there's no gap.
Right.
You can always access something that you're gonna like at a certain age. which is the part I think that's missing. Not only one, but the part that is missing in American comics, in American shops, that you just go and say, maybe I don't like that Oni or Dark Horse or Marvel book, but what about that Italian book?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll just grab it, and that means I'll keep reading, and then I'll be able to come back to what Oni does because I kept reading. This is more or less what you said, right, Sarah?
I'm very attracted. Yes, and I'm very attracted to the European formats of comics too, where they're kind of larger and shorter. God, I would like to try and figure out how to do that because we still get the messages that that's not what people want. But I think from a creative perspective, that is such a much better way to create material because you can get it out in more bursts, which gets people more money at like kind of a regular state. But yeah, that hasn't been something we can figure out quite yet.
Yeah, I love it when that's not what the people want. I keep repeating until you get them what they want.
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep trying.
The format. It's never about the format. Comics, again, we're talking about what makes comics special. You guys can show me, and I can show you 40 comics out of my shelf with different formats, and they work. That comics is the only art form that allow that. You change the format because comics allow it. So that format doesn't work. My ass. You give them the story they want in the place they are going to buy it, and it's going to work. It's a matter of time. So if you're told no, it doesn't work, well, yeah.
But I think that what
it's not going to work forever. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, but what we mean by it doesn't work in America is typically like distribution and marketing and selling those formats. The execution is excellent. Like the execution is beautiful. And you can see that in kids comics. I think that is the one area where you do see a lot of different formats and larger sizes and shorter, like 48 page, 8x10 comic is not, I'm not saying you see a lot of those, but they exist, and kids aren't saying, "Oh, I don't want this because it is not 7x11." But it's the marketplace and distributors, and so there are these like the sort of format weirdness when like, well, we only stock this much comics. We have a shelf that's this big, and the shelves are 9 inches tall, and it literally is like the marketplace dictating the things that we can put into the marketplace.
So important,
and
so important.
Let me tell you this. You know what ECC did like a month ago? ECC is the company that publishes DC in Spain, manga, and other things. My wife is a marketing director, Paloma. They wanted to do something that is called the Black Library Pocket, which is doing Black Label in pocket format, like a novel.
Yeah.
The stores didn't have the shelf for that size. You know what they did? They created the shelf and sent it to the stores.
Yeah.
It's expensive. That's very expensive. Like at the end of the day, you're completely right. Like we have to start thinking of those ways that this is just how much it takes. This is how much money we have to do. But being editor-in-chief, and I think with Shawna being in the industry as long as she has and having her fingers in so many different parts of it, you start learning these like really dumb just business reasons that people have just held on to for years because it's just the way it is. And I think in a lot of ways, the internet responded to that and said, well, screw you. I'm going to make my own comics and put them out the way I want. And we have to kind of find a way to square that circle that I don't have the answers right now, unfortunately.
We'll find them. One way or the other, the answers will come. Is that every time I get asked or ask a creator, do comics have any limits? We all say no. We don't. They don't. But
I know you want this as well, David. I really want artists and writers and creative people and letters and colorists to have like lives and like food and like these robust careers that are sustainable over their entire lives. And to be able to do that, we have to figure out a way to get more money in their pockets and keep it there. And that's a big issue.
Well, of course that's my daughter.
Hello.
Of course that's a limit, but I meant in terms of formats, in terms of the readership we can we can reach, etc., etc. I don't think there's one, because as I said, there's a lot of things we can play with that other art forms just can't. And so another thing that I love about comics, and tell me if you agree, is that in other art forms, the viewer is really passive. Like in a movie, it just goes by. You read a novel, of course, you just read it. That's it. But in comics, either if you involve the reader and get him to be acting and really interested in the story, or they are going to just do that, fuck it, and just move out. We need the reader to be involved. So what's for you the basic thing to get the reader involved, or to get a reader into a story yourself? Joel. I'm sorry, I don't ask easy questions. I know.
Well, I mean, I would say this is a really hard one, because I think a lot about how, as Sarah was saying, how long it takes people to draw comics. We want really rich pages to look at. And that's one of the, when you were saying, David, when you watch a movie, you're just sort of watching it go by. And you can watch a movie a bunch of times and pick up little Easter eggs and things that are in it. One of the things I love about comics is that there's not a time limit. Like, you can just sit there and pore over the page. So if you get something like, I remember Adam Warren pages, looking at those when his either Empowered or Dirty Pair, any of the stuff he was doing would come in. It was just like a little puzzle, because he would bury so much. There was always graffiti and other references to other books in there. And it was just this rich world on every single panel of some comics is that way. And it's sad that, I remember one of the things I did with a young creator I really, really loved that I was working with at Dark Horse. One of the reasons I loved him was because he sort of penciled like young Bernie Wrightson. He had these gorgeous pencils, and it took so long for him to draw a page. I just couldn't say, I couldn't hire him for a project and say, yes, you can take 3 days to pencil a page. So I remember working with him to try to say, let's cut down on your line, let's do these things. And he actually really got to this great style, and he's been working very robustly since then. It's like, you don't want to tell people to hold back your talent or hold back your story, but you do need to find a way to be efficient and get the books out on time. So that's sort of a long-winded way of saying that one of the best things about comics is just how rich they can be in terms of all the information they hold, the way the writing is done, if there are narrative captions along with the dialogue, or if they choose to leave them out so that you get fewer words on the page, but the art does more of the work. Whatever it is, it just has to be a good balance of nailing the storytelling, so that, the experience someone has with the comic is worth that money they spent on it. If you spend $16 on a graphic novel, you want to get hours of entertainment out of that, and you want to revisit it, and that's something that I look for a lot. And some of the, you see that in a lot of unexpected places. Actually, a lot of kids' books are rich with that kind of sort of not hidden information, but just there's a lot there if you spend the time with the pages. I can't remember if I answered your question at all. I'm sorry. I just started talking at some point.
It's fine. It's off the cuff, so I don't even remember my own question. No, I'm kidding. Sarah.
I don't remember your question either, but that's okay. Sarah, what's your answer to this question we don't remember?
It's really hard. I think, the flip side of Shawna's take, which I completely agree with, is sometimes I will read a webcomic with the most simple style, like Ali Brosh, for example, and it just hits you like, oh my God, this is so meaningful to me. So, I hate to harp on the same thing, but I think it's kind of meeting people where they are and having something for as many people as we can. And just having something that creates that response in you, whether it's this art, or this art is terrifying, or the story, it really speaks to me. I agree that comics can do that in a way that nothing else can, and does activate parts of your brain that prose does not, or poetry maybe does, but it not in the same way at all. And at the end of the day, too, I really want people to pick up comics, especially as young people, and be inspired to do the dang thing themselves, because again, the kids that are into Reina and Dogman now need to grow up to be the creators of the future. So how do we inspire them to be like, oh, you like this? Here is a pad of paper. Here is a pencil. This is how you draw a panel border. This is, this is sequential art. So inspiring them to kind of pick it up as well.
Yeah, and what you just said, I always say that one of the strongest tools that comics have is that they go back to our atavic brain. And I mean with this, I always mention pattern recognition. Talk about, hey, I'm a caveman, as you well know. That bush is rustling. Probably there's an animal there that's going to kill me. That we do in comics a lot. As I always say, that's Batman. No, that's not Batman. You just drew the horn in this little shape. And we know that's Batman. So the thing that I think comic does better, well, it does a lot of things amazing well, but one of the things it does better is that we don't need to show most of it. Comic, yes. And as Shawna said at the beginning, since it reaches both parts of your brain at the same time, you don't need anything else. You don't need it completed. You just need a hint. And we all know what's going to happen, right? Shawna?
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, when we were talking a few minutes ago, you were saying, what do you look for in a story? One of the things I was thinking of was pacing. I think pacing is really, really important to draw people in. And it's one of the things that can go really, really wrong with a story too. Like I've read so many books that got off to a really great start and the pacing was really, like if it was a horror book, it was like sort of mysterious and you had this gentle lead into the story and you had time to sort of draw everything out. And then at the end, it's like, oh, and then the guy comes and then there's a big fight and then, because they just sort of ran out of space and room. And so many comics are written so far ahead of when they're actually published that if you don't have a completely written script for, say, 6 issues, and you're winging it, trying to get the first 4 issues out before you finish the last 2, that's one of the problems that I think writers run into is like the pacing issue. And that's one of the things that we try to work really far ahead of schedule at Oni, because we don't want to hit those kind of problems. We want to make sure that the books resolve in the way that they need to. But I think, the format, because of the long timeline it takes to create comics, it does sort of also introduce these problems if you're not able to work far enough ahead to stave those problems off. And, pacing and having time and knowing that you have the time, knowing that you're going to get the next few issues, that a series isn't going to be canceled, for instance. I think that's one of the biggest challenges in comics is that the way they're created, how long it takes, and the marketing and distribution just means that, it's a cash flow problem really, because you're paying for books 2 years ahead of time, basically. And then, so no company wants to write a check that they're not going to see a return on for 2 years, but that's comics. Like that's the whole beautiful stupidity of comics is you actually need to invest in these books 2 years ahead of any time you're going to see a return. And that's one of that's one of the challenges.
But that's what you do in French comics.
Yep.
French comics is you pay advances.
Yeah.
That's the way to get those books done. You pay advances.
I think we all agree with you, but that is a somewhat different model than some companies take.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really, really hard. And I think too, it's been a big education for me at Oni, taking some of those lessons that Shawna was just talking about. And sometimes when you do younger comics for younger people, the younger you go, it kind of gets flipped on its head a little bit. Because I think with kids' books, if you don't catch the kids in the first couple of pages, if you don't draw them in, if you don't make them care, they're just going to put the book down and walk away. Or if you pick it up and you look at it and the kid is confused by something, if that storytelling is not like crystal clear, the younger you go, you kind of have to hold their hand a little bit more unless the art is like excellent. So learning the ways to kind of edit things at different ages has been really, really helpful for me.
Yeah. And that takes me to something that I know you, Sarah, wanted to talk about, how different it is to edit different kind of books, kids, horror, because people equate, as a creative. And I always say, I've been saying it since I started the show, editors are creative first, and then they do the rest. But people stop thinking that, editors do something else, and then when they have time, they're creative. No, being creative is the biggest part. So
it's hard too, because there's so many different kinds of editors at different companies that there are some people that are just like, oh, your book's finished? Well, give it to me on the 21st of August and I'll get it out. Like, there are those editors. But I think Shawna and I want to be.
Sorry, for me, that's not an editor. It's something else. We can change the name. But if an editor is not creative, for me, it's not an editor.
I agree.
It's an administrator. Okay? Sorry, I interrupt you. Please go.
Yep. Let's see what I was going to say. Oh, not just kids and adult, but what I consider, licensed comics, which Shawna has experience with. But in some ways, I kind of see studio-owned comics in the same way. So like your Batman or you're the Hulk or whatever. You're editing in a completely different way because you want the talent involved to be as creatively free as possible, but you still have this other entity over here that you also have to satisfy, whether they're the one saying, oh, you just drew that person from Star Trek and it looks funny and they're going to get mad if they see it, or, oh, you're doing something that's going to be in conflict with some other Batman thing down the line. That's a very different thing than taking someone's memoir or a children's book that's just like pure creative vision. And you have to have a lot of different tools in your toolbox to do those different kind of edits.
Yeah, it's true.
Shawna?
I'm trying to think of what the core question was, because we've taken it down a couple of different paths now.
It's fine. You can go in your own direction. As I said, this is
okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, and what Sarah said, actually, the continuity thing, and when you're working on licensed comics and canon and all that kind of stuff, in a way, when you do creator-owned comics, you still have to do the same kind of editing, because you're, as the editor, you're the one. I worked independently for a long time. I worked freelance. After I left Dark Horse, I had like 6 years where I edited freelance, and I did a bunch of random stuff. I worked for almost every company except Marvel and DC. And I edited a bunch of, I just worked directly with creators who would hire me to sort of consult on their books. And one of the things I did for one of the writers, I was always just sort of reeling him back in, because he would have these ideas, and talking about you, Joe Harris, and he would come up with these ideas, and Joe's, as somebody like that, a writer who's just like hustling every day and trying to get, sometimes he has like 3 different books going on with 3 different companies, and he's trying to stay far enough ahead on one where he can stop writing that one for a month and work on this other one. And a lot of times, Joe's got such a great, fantastic idea factory for a brain. One of my jobs was just to sort of pull him back a little bit and say, now, wait. Now, this is a neat idea for the story, but is this something this character would actually do? And he was sort of thinking like, okay, we could do this big spectacular thing here and then launch the story in this way. And I'm like, no, actually, because if this character does this, he's an asshole and nobody's going to care about him anymore. Or like, that's actually murder and there's a consequence, And so I think that's one of the things that, like you have writers and you have artists who want to do these big spectacular things. And an editor's job, one of them is to just sort of like, let's make sure it all makes sense though. Like, we have to make sure that if a character kills somebody, like there's either a consequence or you just acknowledge like that's actually a thing to murder a person, like it's not just something you can sort of throw in as a plot twist and then move on and still like that character in the same way. So you're still looking for continuity, but one of the things I harp on a lot with creators is just story logic. Like, it doesn't matter. You don't need to explain it. Sarah, we had an acquisitions meeting last week where we were talking about the story logic of this horror thing, where there's this mysterious thing that happens. And, I always say you don't need to explain it, but you do need to understand it. You do. The writer needs to know what the thing is, even if they never put it in the script, even if it's never explained to the reader, the writer still needs to know what the function of this thing is, so that they don't drop the ball somewhere along the way and it just becomes this goofy mess. And that happens all the time in comics. And I think it's because a lot of creators are doing this kind of work on their own without a publisher or without an editor. And then they sort of present these completed books that are really cool looking and there's a neat concept, but things don't quite work in the end because it's like, why did this character do this over here? And then back here, this is a thing they never would have done. And I think you see that in a lot of like Kickstarted projects, I think, where it's like great idea that was sort of never quite reined in to make the most sense that it could. So I would just always harp that no matter what kind of comic you're doing, if it's for kids, if it's licensed, whatever, story logic is really, really important. The writer needs to know, the creator, the artist needs to know what they're doing and why, even if they never explain it. Yeah.
Amen. It's so true, Shawna. Like, they have to explain it to me at least. And if they can't explain it to me, there's a problem. And like, I think Shawna really approaches it this way too, is that not only are we the person calling that stuff out, is that we have to be the one that's the proxy for the reader. We have to be the reader in the room, because if it makes sense to the creator, but it doesn't get executed that way, who cares what your ideas were? What is on the page, what the reader experiences is actually what matters. And so, it's closing the gap between inspiration and execution. Like, being able to remove yourself is very hard when you're a creative person and you're like that much in the thing. It's editorial's job to kind of be able to pull back and be like, you told me you wanted this section to have this effect or tell this part of the story. It's not there. We have to be the reader in the room.
One of my favorite editing tricks is just to play dumb and say like, and ask questions. And it's not even playing dumb, but half the time you get a pitch and you're like, so wait, why is this character doing this here? And, there are a lot of writers who will put things into a story that as a plot device, just to move a story, just to literally move the story to the next point without it actually making sense to character motivation or what is happening logically in the story. So, that's when I talk to a new, especially if I'm working with a new creator on a book or somebody I've never worked with, I just ask a lot of questions. And I always feel like, like playing dumb is not the worst thing to do, to say like, now, why did this character do this? Was this your intention? Or, this is, when I read this, I thought this character was being mean to this other character. Is that what you wanted? And half the time it's not what they want. Half the time they're like, oh, I was trying to do this. You did not succeed in doing that.
So true.
Yeah. And that's so, but you have to be careful approaching that with people. You don't want to be a jerk to the creators you're working with and say, none of this shit you wrote made any sense. So there's a lot of, they're all relationships. You figure out how you work with this creator and how this creator might take feedback the best. And at what point in the story, there are some creators you can work with and you can solve problems a little later in the process. And they won't even be able to think about problem solving in the very earliest stages. And then there are other creators, if you don't iron it out at the very beginning, it's going to be so messed up by the time you get to a certain. So that's one of the reasons I think it pays to have creators that you can have a long relationship with, because you get to know their style, how they work, how they receive feedback. And there are some people that I can just say, hey, this is just dumb. And it doesn't work. I know that what you're going for, and I see it, but it doesn't actually work. So let's try something else. But you don't want to say that to people that you've been working with for 2 months necessarily.
Yeah. But I think too, Shawna, it's also speaks to the value of having an editor with the experience like that you have, because I really do think it's like you have this bag of tools, and depending on what creator you're working with or what story it is or what part of the story or even what day it is, you have to be able to like pull all these things out of your bag to get it done, because everyone needs to be interacted in a different way, and you want to do it in a way that is based on successful outputs. So in a lot of ways, it's not about me at all. It's about what can I do to bring out the best in this person?
Yeah. Yeah, I always said that the best editors are completely invisible on a project. Like you don't want to see an editor's work. You want to see the best work from the creators that you can get. And so our job is to sort of be there pushing. And Sarah, I was going to say too, I think this is something that's particularly true right now. Half the time I feel like the editor's job is just to hear the creator and listen to where they are right now. Because when you're trying to get work out of somebody, and when you're trying to keep a book on deadline and get things done by a certain time, if a creator can't pay their rent, they're not going to produce the pages that you need. They're going to go after cover work for a few months and stop doing the page rate that you've hired them for. And they're going to just pursue whatever work they can get to make their, to meet their human needs. And so half the time what we do with a book, it's not, it's not just this, like, here's your schedule, keep it on schedule. It's like, why aren't you hitting this schedule? And what can I do to help you meet your needs so that you can actually do the work that I hired you to do on this book? And that is, I swear that's 50% of the work sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's not the kind of thing that you can, that's what I think editing comics is a very soft skill kind of job. Like, you need to know proofreading, you need to know the function of, mechanics, you need to know narrative and all this stuff. But you also need to be a human being who understands that the people making the comics are working their ass off. And it's just this grind. It's such a grind. And you need to keep them going on this thing that just feels like, if you have a 25-year-old penciler penciling something for the first time ever, and it's a 6-issue series or say like a 200-page graphic novel that they're not going to see for 2 years, a 26-year-old might really lose interest in finishing that book because there's so much else to do to go earn money. And this person's like, God, I'm going to be 29 by the time this book comes out. And what will I have been doing for the last many years? So you don't see that invisible labor. So that's part of it is, checking in with them. And Sarah knows, God, I mean, I'm having this experience right now on a lot of my books. People are just sort of disappearing into the world of, like, it's a difficult world right now. They need to find ways to pay bills. They need to spend time with their kids instead. So how do you stay engaged with people enough to keep them, like, even if you're just doing 2 pages a month, let's get you to do those 2 pages a month. And that's really hard work sometimes. It's really, really hard because you understand why they're not doing it. Yeah.
Definitely. But you have this other entity, the business, being like, I need the thing.
Yeah.
You said it was going to be due on this day. I planned this whole thing, marketing plans things. The person who buys from the printer plans things. It really is this big kind of machine, but it only works when it's all working together. And when times are as bad as they are right now, what are you going to do? Go to somebody's house and be like, stop taking care of your kid?
Yeah, draw faster.
No.
Yeah. So I mean, so that's when you sort of resort to the bag of tools you have and to whatever problem solving skills you can turn to say, okay, let's figure out a way to get this done. There's been a lot of like, okay, let's find a flatter. Let's do this. Let's break up the work. Let's do it slightly in a different order. Maybe don't color, just focus on inks for a while and we'll letter over the inks instead of lettering. It would be great if you could always letter over colors. You can't do that all the time. So yeah, I mean, so much of it is like it's a puzzle. It's problem solving. Like, how do you keep all of these pieces when you think of all the different pieces that are moving when you're talking about making and selling comics? So there's the marketing, there's the solicitation, you have to keep the catalog copy coming before anything is even finished, before you get final pages in. And it really is just this complex geared machine. And it is hard. It's hard to keep all the pieces lined up and spinning at the same rate.
Yeah, we're project managers. You might be an engineer out there watching this, or maybe you manufacture shoes. I don't know. Like, you might think all our job is like fun and like commenting on art. No, we're project managers, and we have to constantly be shifting deliverable deadlines. And how does that affect the millions of things down the road? And that is incredibly time consuming. It's a big part of our job with like Excel and a giant calendar and a database.
Yeah.
That's not fun, but that's why we are here in a lot of ways.
But you also hit the nail in the head before when you mentioned something that I always tell to new writers and artists, which is if it's in your head and it's not on the page, it never works.
Yeah.
I think that's, that the capital sins, if you want to call it, or the 10 commandments of comics, them is always, don't keep it here, because if you keep it here, that's my first question as an editor, right? Like, why is not on the page?
Yep.
How do I have to figure out? If I have to figure out and ask you the question, this comic is not well done, right?
Yep. Exactly. Yeah.
And the other side of it is, as you just mentioned, and something that I don't think people keeps in mind, and Kathy O'Brien was also mentioning to me, last week from Dark Horse, is the part of sometimes with some books, we have to think almost 2 years ahead, because we have to talk to somebody who takes those books to a bookshop, and those books need location information, etc. They don't work at the same pace as comics do. How do you manage that, especially you, Sarah?
I drink a lot. I cry. Well,
okay, yes, I
know. No, it's a really good question, and I think probably Shawna and I are in a great position to answer this, because we both did come from a kind of monthly comics world where the pace of things is basically dictated by previews, diamond previews, which is a couple months out. So, I'd be in meetings where you're like, oh my God, I need something 3 months from now. Okay, I'll figure it out. I'll just get the cover and assign the people to it, and we'll make it happen. Well, that is not the case in the real book world, where you work with distributors like Simon and Schuster or Penguin Random House or whoever. You basically get a couple seasons, 3 opportunities a year to tell these buyers about your projects, and it's these buyers that actually buy the books and tell you how many you're going to print, because they're the ones that are going to put them on the shelves. They're the ones that are going to stock them in Amazon. They're the ones that are going to stock them at, Barnes and Noble. And so in a lot of ways, they are so important, because you can get a reader stoked about it down the line, but if the buyer wasn't stoked enough on it to buy the thing, it's not going to be there for them. And that process happens 9 months to a year before the book is actually in stores. So, the traditional thinking on this is that buyer is going to want to read the book, which I don't think is that unreasonable. But that means you're going to be working on a book for 2 to 3 years. You're going to show it to a buyer, and then it's going to come out a year later. That's a very, very long tail. And what Shawna was saying about cash flow, both for the publisher and the creator, it's very different and it's very challenging. But that's just kind of how it works if you want to be distributed by a distributor who are also the people that are going to get you in the library, which is really, really important.
Absolutely. Shawna?
It's funny. I saw a question pop up from somebody about what can a publisher provide that self-publishing can't.
Going to be my next one.
And it's all the stuff Sarah just said, basically. It's like, because we are doing all of this work for you, that is actually how comics get into the hands of people. So unless you're, say, a famous online comics creator who has the ability to move enough books to actually justify the rate you want to make. Like I actually worked in my freelance years, I worked on Homestuck, which is a huge, huge online thing, but it has hardly any presence in the actual comics world. And, but the creator, Andrew Hussey, has this huge, he did a Kickstarter for a Homestuck game that raised, it was like at the time, I believe it was the most well-funded video game Kickstarter ever. So you get those rare situations where there's someone who has that kind of reach to an audience that is so specific, that is sort of singular to their vision and what they do, that they can have that kind of impact on a market that is otherwise driven by totally other forces. But very few people have that. Like if you're making a graphic novel that you would hope might sell like 5,000 or 7,000 copies, which is pretty damn good. Like we're very happy with numbers that are 5,000 or 7,000 for our first run. How is one person going to do that? I don't know, because you really need to get the attention for that book. You need to get buyers to buy that book. You need to get retailers to notice your book. So, I mean, in the most sort of basic way, if you get your book in the Oni pages of previews, that's something that retailers are going to be looking at, and it's going to be grouped with these other creators that, like, oh, hey, Ted Nafee and Greg Rucka and, Katie O'Neill, all these people have these audiences already that you can sort of be piggybacked onto, and people will say, oh, there's a little bit of cachet to this because we know that you are of a high enough caliber to be included with these books. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the main things that I think a publisher can do. And then there's just all the basic mechanics of dealing with distribution and printing and all that kind of stuff, which, if what you want to do is draw and write comics, that is a whole other job. Mm-hmm. Marketing, printing, selling, and distributing comics. Let somebody else do that for you, or you will draw one 32-page comic in 5 years, and then spend the rest of your time trying to sell that one 32-page comic. Mm-hmm.
There's so much boring stuff that is actually so dang important. Yeah. And that's another great thing that I learned from Margot, is that a lot of what you're doing is kind of inputting data in the back end, like keywords or age groups or interest groups, goes into this thing called like Onyx. Mm-hmm. But that's what feeds out to, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, whatever. But that is also what allows a buyer or a librarian to find out about your book, because they might type in, I am looking for a graphic novel for ages this to this that deals with LGBTQ issues, bang, and it outputs this list of books. Mm-hmm. And I honestly don't know if there is a way to do that as a self-publisher. I would be curious as to what a really developed self-publisher like Iron Circus, like what ways they tap into that. I don't know how a singular entity could tap into that level of ability to get in those systems. I really don't.
Or even know that it exists.
Except if you are Jimmy Palmiotti. Except if you are Jimmy Palmiotti.
Yeah.
He's the one-man orchestra. Everybody else is like, how did you do it, Jimmy? It's like, because he's Jimmy.
That's Jimmy, and he's been in the business forever. So he had, that's what I mean, though. He's got that kind of personal gravitas and reach. And how many conventions has that dude done? Yeah. That kind of like on the ground work really does get you loyal audiences and readers and fans and people who just are rooting for you because there is that sort of Comic-Con culture. But if you're sort of coming to this fresh and like, hey, I have an idea and I want to try to execute it as a comic, understanding the rules and all the, it's a little Byzantine how much there is to know and how, how complicated it all is. But, that's the reason it's really helpful to network and talk to other people and to see how have you done your books and how have you distributed and what has worked for you. And then, and that's the benefit of working with a publisher. If you can, get your stuff in front of an editor or in front of a publisher, we take those relationships very, very seriously. And we want to give our creators all the tools they need to do their work, to do the best work they can do, and to get it in front of as many people as they can.
And that's why I like doing things like this too, because all of this information that's so important, it seems like it can be very gatekeepery. Like if you're not in the club of people who know, like these are incredibly important tools to like build a successful career. And it does not help anyone if that knowledge is just restricted to this small group, which traditionally is going to be, white American, cis, traditional superhero comics, or, traditional New York publishing. That doesn't help people. And that doesn't lead to like a robust, interesting comics industry either. So having the ability to kind of talk about this stuff and demystify it and give creators more empowerment to understand how they can build a career is really, really important.
But that's also a big part of what I do. With knowing you as people, and then as people, as person, you explain this so people understand from your side of things what their side of things could be. That I think that empowers people to know, okay, so this is a good path and this is not a good path, or
absolutely,
I should try it. And also, show Dark Horse, Boom, Marvel, well, not DC, but everybody's perspective, because there's a lot of ways to publish books. A lot.
Yes.
And I keep thinking about that square, and I always go talking, in video games and video game language. It's like we're way past that stage.
Yeah,
that happened 20 years ago. 25 years ago, we had that square space, as you said, the New York publishing way.
Yeah.
Now tell me, sometimes I get the, I don't know how to show my stuff. Like, wait, what? You have the internet, you have blogs, you have, you have fanzines, you have webcomics, you have a million ways to show it.
Instagram. Yeah.
Don't give me that too. Editors love, and I know you're going to cheer. Editors love people who finishes things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that the idea is to have this whole buffet of publishing options. And you're saying like, well, I want to do this crazy niche thing. Well, here's an option for you that you can make money. Maybe it's through Patreon or Kickstarter or Gumroad. Well, I have this idea that I think is very mainstream successful. Well, here is an option for you. And so it's having the ability to figure out where you fit in, being empowered with that information, and then hopefully allowing that to be actually something sustainable and successful, which is hard to do in a country like America, where you have no safety net, you have no health insurance, housing and school can be so unpredictable. And we have to really face those realities, because our creators, we don't exist without them and their ability to create work.
Mm-hmm. That's why traditional publishers did everything that was in their hands to avoid unions in comics.
Yep.
Let's say.
I thought you said minions, like the little yellow guys, and I was like, huh.
Have there been minion comics? Yeah.
No. I meant unions. So that's one of the reasons. It's history of comics. That's fast. But by the end of the day, Shawna, please go about what we were saying. It's just a matter of, if you're the editor, you're Oni, maybe that specific idea is not good for Oni. But right now, more than ever, and this is why I keep saying this is a golden age, and the floodgates are going to explode sooner or later, there's a lot of companies and a lot of venues for you to publish whatever you want in any kind of comic anywhere, right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the, I was just telling Sarah last week, we got a pitch in that I liked, and it was fun, and everybody thought that it was pretty well written, but it didn't hit some of the marks that we're looking for books at Oni to hit right now. And so I called a friend of mine at a different publisher and said, hey, can I introduce you to this creative team? Because I'd rather do that for somebody. Like, there's no, and that's not even competition. That's not, Sarah's not going to get mad at me for doing that, because these people, if this book goes to this publisher, that's not competition for Oni dollars. Yeah. That's just a book that didn't belong at Oni, but somebody should probably publish it because there's probably an audience for it. So I think a lot of times what we do is, especially when you have a relationship with a creator you really love and you want to cultivate that relationship and you want them to do paid work that gets distributed by other publishers, like that's always good. When your creators are published by other companies, that's a very good thing. So a lot of times when we get pitches or acquisition, like a submission, if I don't take it, I will try to point that person in another direction, just to say, go take, talk to this guy over here, or talk to this person at this publisher. They might like it. This might fit what they're looking for way more than it fits what I'm looking for right now.
Okay. You just reminded me of when Dan DiDio left DC. Mm-hmm. Many people talked about it, and the part that I loved the most was Chip Zdarsky. He literally said, I talked to, Dan DiDio is a big part of why I write comics. And it was because he rejected me. Because Dan said, look, you are not right for DC, but come to Marvel because I think what you do would be good for them. And Chip went to Marvel, and that's why he has a career as a writer in a big way. So it's like sometimes it's just you're not for me, but push him or push her so she goes in a different direction, and that direction is going to open the door and give him or her a future, right?
Yep.
It's hard to say no, but if you can say no but or no and offer either an introduction or some constructive feedback that could really be applied to future work. Usually people want to hear that, and if they don't, that's cool too. Like,
you can only do so much.
Yes,
but I think most editors really care about their creators, are always willing to help them open other doors.
Yeah, but let's be open. If they don't want to hear the criticism, is the problem.
Self-publish. Like, if you want to make a weird ass comic, do it. I am happy for you. It's just how people might partner with you. You have to get in where you fit in.
Yep, exactly.
Absolutely, and sometimes that you are not a good fit. Hi, Shawna. Sarah.
I saw. Hi, Sarah.
Crawling out of my working cave to say hello, wave for hand, and crawls back inside. Working cave? You mean the moving? You're inside the truck.
What could she be talking about? A very cool book that will come out eventually. Ooh.
I know. I'm excited about that.
Let me play that. Where's my baseball bat? Yeah.
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 That's right. There's nothing there. No. Anyway, we were saying, so we talk about that door, which is sometimes the door is open because that book fits what you guys want to do or can do at this time. But there's the future. That's the future. It's like, do you feel there's any doors in terms of publishing for you that you feel that are about to open, to things that you have to say no now to, but maybe I don't want you to get too specific and say, but something is like, not now, but in a few months. This, for example, and I know Shawna's going to kill me for this. Like, I've been wanting for years, and since he had to hire her own horror line from the Dark Horse years, right?
Yep.
Yes,
that'd be incredible.
I know. Yep.
I have an answer. Shawna, do you want to go first, or I can hop in?
Oh, please go. Yeah.
Okay. So Oni has a erotica, sex education, and gender studies line called Limerence Press that was started by Ari Yarwood and is now under Amanda Meadows. And it is hard for us, pun intended, to publish erotica in the same way and get it distributed in the same way that non-erotic comics are distributed. And I think we're starting to kind of hopefully break down those limits. We published a really great book recently called Cheater Code, which if you are an adult, I recommend you check out. That not only is a great comic, incredibly well written, incredibly well drawn, so much heart, and it's funny,
Stop saying that.
And it's also like really sexy and completely explicit and a ton of fun. And it deserves to be seen by like a really wide audience. But there are doors that are closed to us in terms of promotion, in terms of distribution, because it is erotica. And I think it's really interesting to see how Europe handles erotic comics. There's this huge tradition there, and that's just always been there. But the way that I think people are producing content now is very progressive, very inclusive, and kind of breaking a lot of boundaries. So I'm really, really hoping that there's more ways to get that content out and get it in front of people.
Shawna?
Yeah, it's I was hoping that was exactly what Sarah was going to say about Limerence, because there are some amazing books in that line and they're so good, but it is such a niche right now, and it's such a, we're just not allowed to talk about it in certain forums, it seems. But in terms of other things that, maybe comics wasn't ready for in the past, that they're ready for now, that like, is there an opportunity? I think now is the time. Like, we spend all of our time talking about this in editorial, like anything that has not been seen before. If there are creators who are passionate about it and doing good work, let's find those books and get them out there now, because the audience exists. Like, those are, there are real people in the world who want to read comics written by people who have lived as a refugee in their life, or people who have had traumatic experiences, or people who have just, who are from backgrounds that we've never heard from, all of those things. And 10 or 15 years ago, or if I was pitching this when I was on the staff of Dark Horse, it may not have been a good fit at that time for the market that existed now. But I think one of the things, you know, when Sarah said earlier, you have to meet people where they're at, you know, the whole world is there right now because of the internet, because of the way we can reach people with information, share images, all of that kind of stuff. You know, I think this is the world that comics has always wanted. And now it's up to the publishers and the creators to find the projects that will actually get out there and land with people to sort of start building. It's almost like building roads. Like, we need to start building these roads to get to the readers that we want, because we see the readers and they're out there. And there may be just one or two books that are for that particular reader right now. So, you know, so it is all this sort of like infrastructure work to, like, how do you build the roads to get there? And then how do you how do you even find the creators who have not traditionally had doors open for them in comics? You know, I mean, I'm very proud of my long history in comics, and, you know, I got an awesome Rolodex and people that I'm really excited to work with. But, you know, really, really bluntly speaking, if I look through my Rolodex, it's probably 85% white men.
Yes.
And people whose work has been published for decades now. And that's not a bad thing. Those are, you know, some of these are just incredible creators, legends, but they have inroads and their stories are being told, and there's no shortage of these stories out there. And so one of the things we're trying to do right now is really, like, grow our Rolodexes and just find people. I spend so much time on Instagram, just like following hashtags in a way that I never expected I would, because it's not how I used it personally 5 years ago. But the way I use the internet now, looking for art, I will find one really cool piece of art that, say, a Black focused convention posted. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to follow this hashtag. And then I'm going to go to this creator site and then look at everybody else they follow. It's just, you know, it's like a map. You're sort of wanting to follow all the little roads cover people.
Yeah, it's research in a way, right?
It is. And it's like, it may sound ridiculous to say, like, it's research if I spend 2 hours on Instagram, but boy, you can get a lot done and open a lot of doors.
You start, you know, taking the thread and going.
Exactly.
It takes you to 5, and finally it can take you to something that you could never in your fucking life could find.
Totally. Every day. That's what it's like. And, you know, and I think it's totally fine for some people if you want to just go on your Rolodex and your established relationships. And, you know, this is in no way saying that I don't want to work with these people again, or, like, the interesting thing is trying to find ways to bring these people in, like, you know, when we were doing our big Gail Simone, the 7 Days project, Bill Sienkiewicz did a cover for us. So it's like you find a way to sort of marry the two worlds sometimes. But I think where the real, you know, richness in comics lies right now, the future is really in all of these people we just have not heard from yet, art we haven't seen yet, stories that have not been told.
But that's also why I always, you said the road. I use the model of the train in the United States. You know, it started in one place, another place, and then got in the middle. It wasn't in the middle, but you know what I mean? For comics. You just said, and it could be applied to what you said about the Rolodex. You have your generation. Of course, they can still work. That's one of the train tracks.
Yep.
You have the new generation. That's the other train track. And then we go to what you, Sarah, was telling before about that missing part. That's when you get to put together the two tracks of the train, right?
Yeah, and there's also room on the train for more people. Like, that's the thing. Like, you want to stop at all the stations along the way and open the doors really widely and look for people, say, like, hey, there's room on this train for you and your stories. If they're good, if you know what you're doing, if you're willing to work with editors and publishers to make your work the best it can be, then there's room on this train for you.
And it's not also about room on the train. It's about, you have the highest speed train.
Yeah.
You have the graphic train. You have that guy who wants to go with a graphic novel, small. You have that guy who wants to go with a big, splashy, genre story. There's all kind of trains, there's all kind of tracks. There's the past, there's the future. And many people, when they try to deny the past, it's like, no. Comics are built on the past. We need the past.
Yeah.
We need to look ahead, because a problem that comics had, Sarah, tell me if you agree or not, is that they've looked to the past too much for too much time.
I think I agree with you that looking to the past is important, but it's only part of it. And I would never want to not look to the past, but because you also learn things what not to do from the past, quite frankly. So not knowing it is going to be a detriment to us all. And also things can change constantly too. Like, it's wild. I never thought I'd be talking about like shorter graphic novels. For a while. I was like, oh, every graphic novel should be like 250 pages, 300 pages, really give someone bang for their buck. And now I've just been thinking about like, well, in the world we're in, how do we kind of center the experience of the creator and make it so it's more sustainable for them? Well, shorter graphic novels, maybe black and white with tones that, help speed up things a little bit. Like, I just want there to be options, like, yes, there's this 300-page graphic novel that you publish with Random House, but also here are some other ways that you can be in this business as well and tell your own story.
Like 48-page albums.
Totally.
Yeah, I'm a fan, Yeah.
No, but that's also what I brought as a joke, but also seriously, because it's just what Sarah said,
Yeah.
Less pages, creator gets paid earlier, it's published earlier, it's a different format. What we just said, different trains also means different formats, right?
Yep.
I think too, when you're a younger creator, and I think Shawna and I have talked about this a lot at Oni, maybe that 400-page graphic novel that's going to be the best thing you've ever done in your life, you don't have to publish that first. Like, in fact, you probably shouldn't. No. Maybe you do a couple of those shorter things first to really get your name out there and build that audience, so that when you do want to hit me with this big 400-page award-winning novel, like, you've already kind of built up an audience, but you've also built up a trust with a publisher and editor, because it's going to be very hard for someone to like say okay to a 9-year-long publishing program.
And it's also sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was thinking about this too. You said something earlier, Sarah, basically about finishing something, like, just, I can't remember if it was David or Sarah. I thought Sarah said it.
Which was the editors love people who finish things?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. One of the pieces of advice I remember giving at San Diego Comic-Con a long time ago is that there was this writer standing in front of me, and it was literally just like this pile of papers, and he's like, these are all my pitches and this is what I have. And I was like, have you finished any of them? And he was like, no, I don't. And it was literally a pile. And I remember telling him, and I think about this, like, you can compare comics to some other mediums. And it's like, you don't walk around at, say, this doesn't really happen, but like a music convention with your guitar and say, now who's going to pay me to write a song? Like, you write the fucking song. You write the song, and then you record, you find a way to do it. And I remember just telling this guy, like, just write something and finish it so that you can hand it to me and I can leave with it. Like, don't count. I actually don't want to talk to you for 2 hours right now and then wait to read something that is not finished. Like, if you can finish something, I don't care if you're a writer and you draw it yourself with stick figures, make a mini comic that shows off your writing and leave it with somebody so that they can walk away and know what it looks like when you finish a story, whatever it is, or pay somebody, scrape together $300 to pay somebody to draw something for you and make a mini comic out of it or put it online. But in comics, because it's so expensive to work with artists, and because it's, you know, like it is sort of this convoluted world, you have all these people standing there with their guitar talking about all the songs they want to write, and they've never written a single song. And so how do you publish that person? You don't. Those people don't get published.
Nope.
You have to have the initiative to write your own stuff and to finish your own work. And that's, publishers are looking for people that have that initiative to know, like, this is not, you're not going to get into comics in your first year or two out there and make a living doing it. It's just not going to happen, no matter, really almost no matter who you are. And so you have to show that you have the initiative to, like, yes, I can find a way to pay my bills and make my rent. And this is the thing that I really want to be doing. And I'm going to finish it and hand it to you. And then maybe someday you could help me sort of make this into a thing that makes money for me eventually. But it's just not one of those, like, I'm going to wait here for somebody to give me permission or a budget to do my first thing to show you how good I am. It's just never going to work.
That's so unnerving. It's like, but you know how good I am. Like, no, I don't, because you didn't fucking write it.
I don't know how good you are. I actually don't. You can tell me.
And they get mad at me. Like, wait, let's rewind. Let's rewind. You're telling me you're amazing, but you don't have anything to show it. And you get mad at me because I'm telling you, you are not showing. So you expect editors to just hire you because you say you're good. Fuck off. Go home.
Yeah.
You know, get a life, and then you come back. But that happens a lot in comics also. You know, people who expect before they show anything to be hired, and then they get mad when you don't.
Yep.
That people is never going to work in this business, because, as you said, it's not only about the initiative. It's about putting the. Sorry, I was going to say another curse word.
Yeah.
Put in the hours.
Yeah. Put in the hours, but it sucks. But you kind of have to have enough self-awareness too, of like, you might be drawing the best thing you've ever drawn, and I'm stoked for you on that, and I'm really proud of you. But it might never be what a DC Comics wants to hire you for. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, like, it is what it is. Like, maybe then you should not, like, set your entire heart and soul on drawing Batman. There's other ways for you to be part of a creative community and tell your stories and express yourself. You just kind of have to get in where you fit in. Mm-hmm. And, have that kind of self-awareness of, like, this is who I am, and this is my abilities, my way of expressing things. And it might not be for everybody.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be, right?
No.
I mean,
well, no, it doesn't have to be for everybody. But I think sometimes people get their heart set on a thing, and I don't blame them. Like, if you grow up reading Batman and loving Batman, I get it. I really, really do. But I want people to have careers, like, and eat and have a life. And if you're going to run after something that's not attainable or sustainable, I can't help you there, unfortunately.
That's why I say that I never have problems being the bad guy, or this, as some friends call me, the soul crusher. A bit over the top, but well, no, that's true too. Anyway, but I prefer to do exactly what you just said. You know, you're very good to do comics. You have the talent, but the path you're trying to go, which is, as we said, could be Batman. This is not your path. Stop. Your path is that one, or I want to tell you which one it is, because maybe I don't know, but I know for sure this is not your path.
Yeah,
or at least not right now.
Yeah.
I prefer be the soul crusher at that moment, so he finds his own voice and his own, his new path, than just let him, keep trying and trying, and then in 10 years he leaves comics because he hasn't achieved drawing Batman.
Yeah,
it's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah, it is. If anybody of you here watching thinks that editors like to tell people no, or no, you're so wrong. It's really, really, really hard.
It is. Yeah, I think a lot about portfolio reviews like this. At different different editors and different publishers have different ways of approaching this. I always love doing portfolio reviews. It's hard because you're, it's a job interview for a lot of people. A lot of people are standing there in line and they really want to either work directly for you, or they want you to tell them how to get a job drawing Batman, or how to get a job drawing BPRD, or like whatever. Well, more than half the time, 90% of the time, you're looking at portfolios of people who will never draw Batman and never draw any of these books that they want to, because their work doesn't quite line up for it, or they don't have the professional skills. It's like people talk about talent for drawing comics, but it's really the skill that matters. Like, you can have all the talent in the world, but not have the skill or the motivation or the dedication to draw enough regularly to meet a weekly or a monthly deadline schedule. Like, you could
commercial art, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. It takes so much. And these are deadlines, these are periodicals we're talking about. Like, you need to do things on a periodic basis and turn it in on a regular, and you can't just sit there and wait to be struck by inspiration. So the way I always approached portfolio reviews was sort of different than a lot of editors, because I would just try to sort of set aside expectation and say, well, what do you want to do, and what is your art doing now? And then, again, sort of doing that, like asking not dumb questions, but sort of like, well, I'm going to just ask you a lot of questions, almost like a counselor, about this portfolio I'm looking at. And what do you see here? When you look at this cover composition you've done, do you see a Batman cover here? I'm like, no, I don't, and it's like the answers are always there if you ask the right questions. And then, following that same sort of line of thinking, it's like, okay, well, is it really Batman you want to do, or is it something else? Well, actually, I really grew up reading Piranha Press books, and I like that weird stuff, but I want to make money. It's like, okay, actually, let's talk about the weird stuff, because this looks like weird stuff to me. This is not Batman stuff.
Yeah, your heart is taking you in that direction.
Totally. And just your ideas and your vision for things. So it really is, another thing that I think a comics editor is a career counselor. And I have talked so many people out of becoming comics artists, because I think they should pay me for that, because it's, I'm saving them. I remember talking to a really, really talented, like, caricaturist, like illustrator who regularly did work for Rolling Stone and Sports Illustrated. And he was like, I really want to draw comics. I'm like, no, you don't. You do not. Because right now you get paid about $2,000 to draw something that takes you about 3 hours. And it may take you a long time to sort of come up with a composition and to figure it out, but you're doing 3 or 4 hours of work on this, and you're getting paid like what at the time was like an editorial rate for an illustration in a magazine. I'm like, do you know how long it's going to take you to draw one page of a comic? And if you're lucky, maybe somebody will pay you $150 to draw that one page. Like, you're talking a day or two. And especially if what you do right now are spot illustrations for magazines, it's going to take you a week to draw a page until you get good at it. And people are, half the people standing in line with their portfolios are not at all prepared to hear this. Like, they don't know the grind. I remember, like, I'm not an artist at all, but I do like to draw. And I've made a couple of mini comics just as like jokes or presents for people. And oh my God, I remember trying to draw a pinball machine one time, and it was just like hours. And I remember I had just given some sort of like, not harsh, but, solid criticism to Greg Ruth, who is this amazing illustrator. And I'm like, Greg, this doesn't look that good. You could do something else. And then I was just trying to draw like straight lines for 2 hours to get the perspective on a pinball table. I'm like, oh God, how am I even qualified to tell anybody how to draw? But that's the thing. It takes that, like, you don't realize it until you're there doing it, that it is a grind. It is not some like, oh, I'm just whipping out these pages. And, maybe some people do that. But drawing comics is painful. It's physically painful. You sit in the same spot for hours at a time, hunched over, trying to, make things look right. And so many people just have a different idea of what comics is like and what working in comics is like. Or they think that it's like where the big money is. It's like, oh, sorry to tell you this, but it's hardly any money over here. And you got to work really hard to pick up all the little pieces you can.
We're doing the same at the same time.
Yeah. It's yes, no. But yeah, so I that's another thing that I think editors spend a lot of time doing, is sort of explaining the process and the reality to people, because there's this whole other concept of what it's, I was telling Sarah, I took a call, just a friend of a friend who was offered a publishing deal last week. And it was this young creator. She's like, I got just out of the blue, somebody hit me up and offered me a contract for this online comic that I was doing. And she just had no idea where to start with, like, this is the offer they made me. How do I even look at that? And some people would say, like, well, think about your hourly rate and what you want to make. I'm like, okay, that's a little optimistic for to think that you might actually get a living wage for drawing your first comic. I'm sorry to say, but so what I told them, and this is something we talk about a lot in Oni editorial, is like, just look at the math. Like, look at, you got to base your offer, your advance offer, on doing some very critical math and thinking, like, how many copies is this going to sell? How much is it going to take to print? If it's a very elaborate print job with a hardcover and all sorts of gold foil and fancy art paper, like, what is this going to be, a $60 book? And you're gonna draw, so you really have to sort of walk them through just the very basic math of, we expect this book to sell this many copies. This is how much Oni will make if we publish it, and this is how much you will make. And it's not as much as you might think for either of us.
Yeah.
So much work, so much labor for everybody involved just to make a few $1,000s sometimes. A few $1,000s. And I think a lot of creators misinterpret that as, you don't think my art is worth that money. And it's not that. It's just that we have to take this very realistic and pragmatic approach of, how much money can we all earn on it, doing our very best job to market it. Can you finish the book a year ahead of time? So as Sarah was saying, we can show it to librarians and buyers, and like, these are all the things it takes just to sell enough copies, sometimes to make like $10,000 on a book.
And I understand why people are distrustful of publishers. Publishers have earned that distrust in a lot of ways over the years. So getting a deal and then saying to a publisher, like, I need to see your math on this, I think should be standard.
Yeah.
And not only seeing the math, but if I succeed, let me walk that back. If the publisher is succeeding, am I succeeding too as a creator, and at what level, and at what ratio of that? Because we want people to succeed. But making sure that it's a fair level of success, that we're truly partners and that we both have skin in the game, I think is really, 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 really important. And there's a lot of younger creators out there right now, especially in the middle grade and young adult, being offered these massive advances. Yeah. What strings are going to be with those? And like, if you can make it work within those constraints, that's great. But really being aware of what you're getting into is very, very important. And that sometimes is where a good agent helps. A good lawyer who knows comics helps. But someone who is just an agent in TV or film may not understand the comic book industry. Some agents that are in the traditional publishing sphere may not understand the scale of the comic book world as well, because we are selling fractions of what a traditional prose book could sell. And people look at Raina, who obviously is like the queen of everything, but that's a very rare situation, and very well earned, but very rare.
Yeah, and not everybody. I mean, and half of that is distribution. Half of it is like, the reason Scholastic can sell so many books is because of that infrastructure they've created over decades of book fairs in schools. And I remember writing out orders on my little paper form when I was in 6th grade to get books. And my kid does that, like, to this day. He comes home from his elementary school when they're school with the Scholastic Forums, and there's a book fair twice a year, and it gets very crowded in the library, and all their kids and their parents show up and crowd into these spaces and try to, like, okay, here's the new Raina book, and here's Dogman, and it's super thrilling, but it is not a marketplace that exists for most publishers. Like, that is just, like, every elementary school in America to have access to that as a shop, as a vending machine, sort of, for the books you do. Wow. So there are some, so there are all, and it's the same with, I remember when I first started learning about newsstand distribution 1,000 years ago, and learning about, like, Archie comics, and how, like, Archie 1,000 years ago got those little racks at the front of the grocery store. So, when you're standing in line to pay for your groceries and you see a Jughead double digest, like, that is an antiquity. Yes. That comes from newsstand distribution decades ago, and a relationship. The term is grandfathered in. It was literally grandfathered in, but those are spaces that Archie has had access to for years and years and years and years. So they, that's one of the reasons Archie, I mean, they do great work too. I'm a big Archie fan, always have been, but just the infrastructure that they built decades ago to get into traditional newsstand distribution is why Archie can take some of the risks they can right now and do some sort of interesting books, and maybe take a risk now and then, because they have this weird spot, like, people, randos standing in line who've never bought a comic book in their life might see this one thing waiting to buy their groceries and be like, I'm going to pick up this Jughead horror book or whatever, I don't think those books get distributed on the newsstand, but like, it's all these things. So publishing is such a weird and old industry, and the mechanics of it, and where doors are open for distribution and where they are completely closed. Like, you cannot get a newsstand placement at this point. Like, it's just, I don't even know if it's if you have a supernatural feat, sort of. So, yeah.
I remember when I learned that, like, when you go to a Barnes and Noble or whatever, the books on the end cap that are facing out and you can see the covers, or the books on the table, I was like, oh, someone here must like these books. No, people pay for that.
Pay for that space. Yeah.
Publishers pay for that space.
Yeah.
Coverage. Publishers pay for coverage.
Yep.
That's hard to compete with, because it's very, 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 very expensive. And so you have to, when you have limited budgets, you have to really think about, like, what is the best way to spend this money that's responsible but has high impact. That's very hard with someone that has a splashy marketing budget that can literally have their book facing out.
Yeah.
As opposed to just racked.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have to reach and plug my computer in. Hold on a second.
Sarah says, creating comics is physically painful. I want that printed in a T, haha, but I wouldn't be working on anything else. That does make me a little masochist. Hey, you do comics. We do.
We're all masochists.
We're all right there with you, Sarah.
Remember what Charles Soule said, that people attributes to Kirby, but it was Charles Soule's. Like, comics will make you cry, kid. So it's part of doing comics, right?
I really wanted the crying to be as minimal as possible, though. God, I just I just
have the back spasms, and you too, and me too.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. I've had.
We're all
tendonitis. It's so painful, and you're trying to work, like, oh my God, oh my back, oh my God, oh shit, but I have to go back.
Yep.
So,
yep.
Sarah?
I mean, we're all in this together, and I just want there to be as little as crying as possible. And I really want people to be able to make informed choices, so at least they know what they're getting into. Yeah.
And we can use painkillers.
And massage. Someday massages will come back. So
yes, bars and massages and conventions where we can all see each other, and, like Shawna said, see the people buying the books and they're so stoked on them, and see the young people who are like 15 but kicking ass at drawing already. Like,
Yeah. So the Baki Neoji, it's great to see faces of creative folks you've otherwise interacted online. Has so many valuable suggestions and great info too. Thank you. And he just adds by the end. Oh, Greg says cheater code is great.
It is. It is.
And Neoji adds, thank you, Sarah. What you just said is very helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Finding ways to connect like this, I think, is going to be more important as we go on. I think a lot of other younger folks are connecting on Discords, creating kind of groups within each other's ability groups and like colorist groups and lettering groups. And I think that's really great because you can share information in a way that lifts each other up and protects each other in a way that wasn't available before. And as much as we love conventions, as we've said, that's not a possibility for a lot of people to do them. It's just, you know, a young creator, if they say to me, should I go to San Diego? I say, absolutely not, unless you can treat it like a vacation, because it's not a place for you to do business. So finding other ways on the internet to connect is going to be more and more important as time goes on.
Get to be known by the internet, and then maybe if you get known, then you go to San Diego.
Yep, exactly.
And so go to the beach and go to the zoo and stuff like that too.
Yeah. And go to make friends, but not deals necessarily. Yeah.
There you go. Exactly. So that's, you know, we've been at this for 2 hours. And you have a life to go back to. So
I hope my kid is still alive. He's been out there watching Captain Underpants on Netflix for 2 hours. So
that sounds good.
It sounded pretty good. I mean, I heard him laugh a few minutes ago, so I think he's still there.
Okay,
yeah,
that's good. And my kid is not yelling anymore, so probably she's taken already the bath, which it should be me doing that. But you know, Paloma saves my ass. So last one. If we look to the future. We talked about Onis, you know, what you're trying to do in the future. But what is the next barrier you think comics should break? Or try to break?
I have the worst answer.
Yeah,
do it.
There's never a bad answer.
All right, so it's a complicated one, though. It's in America. It's finding a way for people to have health care. I don't know how that works, but like, you know, finding ways for people to have more safety nets so they can really dedicate themselves to a creative life, I think is going to just be more and more important, because it's very, very scary to ask someone to make a creative life when the world is also scary.
Yeah. I remember, sorry, Shawna, and then you go. I remember when back in the day, we got our first, exclusivity offers, and the exclusivity offers didn't include, healthcare and all that. And I kept saying to people, "Nah, we don't need it." Like, what? Yeah, because American artists get, no, we don't. Like, how do you not? Because we have free healthcare all over Spain, so we don't need it. And they looked at us like we were aliens, and they were like, "Oh my God, how do you guys do it?" It's like, well, this is not the question. For me, the question is, how does the rest of the world do it and America doesn't?
Yeah.
Sorry to say that, but
yeah, no, it's entirely true. Yeah, and I hate to sort of piggyback on Sarah's answer, but I agree. I don't think the boundaries, again, I think the onus is on publishers now to find the material, because it's all out there. Like, all of the books that should be being written and drawn right now, they're being written and drawn by somebody. We just have to find them and make those connections and help those people establish their careers. But none of that is going to happen unless they can actually pay rent, pay for groceries, and make a living doing this stuff. And I mean, it's hard for professionals working in the industry to make a living doing. I've been at this for 22 years, and like 2 years ago was the first time I was like, okay, I feel like I'm making almost grown-up money at this thing that I've been, working at for decades, literally. Mm-hmm. And, people would be shocked at how little money is made in comics sometimes. Mm-hmm. So, so I think the challenge is, but I think how we're going to get there is by finding the infrastructure that Sarah was talking about. Like, how do we make it so that we can have people who have fulfilling rich creative output
Mm-hmm.
and can actually go to the dentist if they have a toothache.
Wow.
I know it's a crazy thought, but yeah, I think all of the work is being done. All of the creators are out there, and I think a lot of the readers are out there. But it's like the infrastructure that we need to build to make sure that there's a safety net for people who are going to spend 2 years doing nothing but drawing in order to make a book happen.
Mm-hmm.
Because if that person also needs to go work at Trader Joe's 40 hours a week, that book's not going to come out for 10 more years, you know?
And making sure that the work that they do is maximized for success, whatever that means for them. It's usually money, but
yep.
It sounds so grim. I'm sorry. But
it doesn't sound grim. It sounds realistic.
Yeah.
And in many cases, as you know, the perspectives or prospectives, as you want to call it, before you start in this business, you look for the golden parachute.
Yep.
And many times it's just go down. If you get if you get a car from the 50s, that's comics. It's not the golden parachute. It's not. It's not the Aston Martin. You know.
Right.
With luck, you will get that car from that scene in Africa from 50 years ago. That's comics. And then when you recognize that, when you know that's the reality, then you can love it. You can enjoy it. You can do comics forever. But first, we have to tell you this is the reality, and then we go from there.
I love a movie option. I love a TV deal. But at the end of the day, I really want people to have long publishing careers.
And let's be honest, when somebody creates a comics that is directly created, so it's a pitch, those comics are always badass.
Mm-hmm.
They're unreadable. You're like, oh my god, this is so obvious you're creating a pitch for a movie. So do a good comic.
Yeah.
Too hard on it, and maybe then you will get an option. If you try to do an option with a comic, oh my god, that's not gonna happen.
Yeah, we can tell. Also, we can also tell. Like, oh, this is a good pitch for a Netflix show, but this is not.
Or it was a pitch for a Netflix show and it didn't work.
Yeah,
and now you're trying to shoehorn it into a comic. It can be done, but you have to understand comics.
Yeah, but there was a pitch. That's a part. But when it's not, and you try to use comics to get to another medium, then I get mad.
I don't think it's happening as much, fortunately.
It happens. It happens. I've seen it, and that's when I get mad and I say, "You are using us because you don't give a shit about us, and you're using us to get to another point." And that's
no. And again, it's people misunderstanding comics as a medium in the first place.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so what time is it? It's 7:23. 11:23 for you. So please don't leave because I want to say proper thank you to you after on with the live feed. But to all of you, thank you so much for being here. Next weekend, don't be assholes. Wear your mask. Thank you, Sarah, a lot.
You're welcome. Happy New Year, everybody.
And thank you, Shawna, a lot.
Thank you, David. Thanks for having us.
And let me say publicly to you both, I love you. And
we love you too, David.
I miss you more than you can imagine.
Miss you.
So this is my heart.
Hugs.
And I'll see you in your neck of the woods, somewhere in the middle. We'll make it happen. Okay?
Yeah. Sometimes.
And for all of you, next week. Yes, I'm crazy. We're doing this next week too. On Monday, Carla Pacheco.
Wow.
We have Spider-Woman and something else. Crazy fun, as you'll see. Emma Rios, another amazing genius creator. And on Monday, Spanish and Argentinian creators, Maribel Caló, who works in El Jueves, a satirical magazine in Spain, and Argentinian, who said hello before, Paula Ventimiglia, Argentinian illustrator Paula Ventimiglia.
Awesome.
Hope to see you there. We're leaving in 5, 4, 3,